He appeared as someone born in the middle of a desert, raised as an orphan, engaged in trade. But that is not the truth. He was not just a soul carried in a body. He was a divine sign imprinted upon time itself, carrying a depth that pushed the limits of human reason. Prophet Muhammad was human, yes, but he did not carry an ordinary mind. His intellect was not a mind that merely tried to make sense of what it saw, nor a memory that only repeated what it had learned. His mind had the strength to bear revelation, the vastness to carry the weight of truth. Ibn Arabi said, "Everything was given to him, yet he never claimed anything as his own. For he was not chosen to possess, but to carry a trust. And that trust was not simply a book, a law, or a set of words. It was the opening of humanity to the deepest point it could reach in truth. You may think the paths he walked were only stony roads in Arabia, but those paths were passages carved into the conscience of humanity. His mind was not created merely to think. It was created to understand together with the heart. Revelation never descends upon a mind alone. It descends where the heart is present. The Quran came to him, but first it touched his heart. It did not descend upon his reason. It descended upon his being. We will send down upon you a weighty word, he was told, and he carried that weight not with rebellion, not with complaint, not with escape, but with surrender. Anyone who wishes to reach the limits of the intellect must first understand his surrender, because his mind was not trained to control everything, it was trained to entrust everything to Allah. The mind of Prophet Muhammad never sought credit for itself. It attributed all to Allah. That is why his mind could forgive his enemies, because forgiveness is not the act of reason, but the movement of a heart guided by Allah's permission. That is why his mind never glorified itself with blessings, because he knew the one who gives is Allah. And to claim what is given is to betray the trust. His mind never placed itself at the center, for he knew who stood at the center. Allah was there. And so the greatness of his intellect cannot be measured by miracles or extraordinary events. It was the clarity of a mind walking in the path most aligned with Allah, pure, true, unbent, unbroken, and wholly directed toward the real. This is why Ibn Arabi said, "He is the perfection of the intellect," for he is the final point to which the human mind can arrive, and that point is not reached by knowledge alone, but by surrender. Your mind may always want to ask, why, how, for what reason? But his mind found peace only by entrusting those questions to the divine mystery. He was never trained to know everything. He was trained to trust in everything. His mind did not choose knowledge, it chose wisdom, and wisdom can only be grasped by an intellect that walks with the heart. As Ibn Arabi said, he thought with his heart, and his mind bowed in prostration to his heart. That is the highest station of intellect, to seek understanding not by leaning on oneself, but by leaning on the Creator. Because whatever you think you understand only comes alive if Allah allows it. The mind of the Prophet was not confined to his own age. It was a reflection that could reach across centuries. That is why when he spoke, his words did not remain in the streets of Medina. They echoed centuries later in Tokyo, in Istanbul, in Andalusia. His intellect was never imprisoned in time. It carried an awareness that transcended time itself. But this awareness did not come easily. He had learned how to remain alone, to be silent on Mount Hira, to be still among crowds, to stand with calmness among anger. Because true elevation in this world does not begin with a throne, it begins with silence. And the silence of Prophet Muhammad spoke more than words ever could. He did not treat language as a tool to dominate. He knew even words must prostrate before Allah. That is why every word he spoke carried wisdom. His mind was never in the service of the ego, but always in the service of truth. And when people did not understand him, he did not grow angry, because he knew that understanding is not a gift given to everyone. Instead, he was patient, for patience is waiting for truth to unfold. His intellect was like a sword sharpened by patience. It never broke, but it cut. It cut through falsehood, for that was necessary. Yet it never shattered hearts, for he was never sent to break souls. With his mind, he ended wars. But with his heart, he ended the tyranny of the ego. And that was the greatest battle of all. This was the brilliance of his intellect: to win without appearing as a warrior, to guide humanity without appearing as a king, to teach truth without sounding like a philosopher. His path was not about grandeur, it was about depth, and that depth could only be recognized by those who were silent, who reflected, who opened their hearts. The mind of Prophet Muhammad was the simplest, the quietest, yet the most powerful intellect ever to walk the earth. Because his mind did not work for his own existence, it worked to understand the will of Allah. Ibn Arabi said, "He nourished his mind and heart from the same source. That is why his words pierced straight through the hearts of people." Today, humanity knows much, but feels little. Knowledge increased, but wisdom diminished. Words multiplied, but silence disappeared. Our minds became full, yet our hearts remained empty. Prophet Muhammad established this balance perfectly. For his mind was not only focused on understanding, it was focused on giving meaning. His intellect did not seek to defeat others, but to reveal the truth. He did not argue, he simply pointed to the light of truth, and those whose hearts awakened would walk with him. That is why his intellect taught not by force, but by attraction, not by threats, but by wisdom. For he knew, what opens a heart is never just a word, it is a state of being, and his state was not only a teaching for his own time, but for all times until the end. As Rumi said, he was such an ocean that even a stone falling into it would be washed with mercy. Even those filled with hatred were transformed when they came into contact with his intellect. Because his mind never saw enemies as enemies, he saw them as hearts that had not yet heard. Ibn Arabi wrote, "He looked at every being with eyes that could see the divine secret within, and his gaze could humble without shaming, could overcome without crushing." Today, someone who has lost a friend, been defeated by an enemy, or feels utterly alone, if they encounter his intellect, they rise again. For his mind still speaks to the darkness of our age. It seeks a way out of the world that suffocates you, but that way out is not shown to your mind, it is shown to your heart. The intellect of Muhammad is not a light understood by those who say, "I have become something." It is a light grasped only by those who say, "I am nothing." And this is why his mind could not be contained in one era. It could not fit onto a single page of a book, nor into a single line of law, nor into a fragment of history. His intellect is not merely the tongue of a prophet, it is the language of light itself. And unless that light falls from the mind into the heart, it remains only knowledge. But when that knowledge touches the heart, it brings a human being to prostration. To understand his mind, you must first let go of what you think you know about yourself. For he had gone beyond knowing himself. He had given his very being to Allah, surrendered his mind entirely to Allah. Ibn Arabi said, "The intellect expands when it is surrendered to Allah, but it narrows when it is surrendered to the ego." Could this be why the modern mind feels so tight and restless? Because you give your intellect to the world while keeping your heart distant from Allah. But the path of Prophet Muhammad was to entrust the heart to Allah and the intellect to wisdom. And that surrender lifted him to the summit of humanity. He did not climb to the peak by exalting himself. On the contrary, he bowed the lowest. For the summit of the intellect is only open through prostration. Today, what is sought is not another university diploma, but a heart that bends. For his intellect was not only a lamp for the darkness of his time, it became a lantern for the hearts of the future. And that lantern still burns, because the light of truth is never consumed by time or place. The mind of Prophet Muhammad was not merely about thinking. His perception reached the essence of justice, mercy, and truth. He judged even his enemies with fairness. He treated not only his companions with balance, but even those who tried to harm him. Even on the battlefield, he did not silence the voice of his heart. At Uhud, when his tooth was broken, he did not curse. In Taif, when he was stoned, he did not condemn. For his intellect was not created for revenge, but for the message. Ibn Arabi said, "His spirit encompassed the world, because his intellect was not open only to his own being, it was open to all existence." This is why the intellect of Muhammad became not just a personal wisdom, but the shared memory of all humanity. He was not only a leader, he was a sign of how the human mind is meant to evolve. In his intellect, there was not conflict, but balance. Not hatred, but mercy. Not pride, but humility. Because his intellect was not made to control time, it was made to witness time. And this is why, in Sufism, his understanding is called Muhammadan awareness. There is a concept in Sufism, Muhammadan awareness. And this is not just about understanding what he said. It is about daring to think as he thought. Muhammadan awareness is far more than a level of intellect. It is a station where the heart itself bows down in prostration to that awareness. To reach this station, reading books is not enough. You must quiet the mind and let the heart speak. For Prophet Muhammad heard directly from Allah, and he understood with his heart. He did not merely recite the verses, he lived them. He lived inside them. And this life was not born from theory, but from surrender. Rumi said, "Even those who opposed him eventually saw the truth within him, for he never fought with himself. He surrendered his ego to the truth." This is why his intellect is not only a teaching for those who loved him, but also for those who never knew him. Today, if someone seeks patience, they must look at the patience of Muhammad. If a leader seeks justice, they must return to the judgments of Muhammad. If a teacher seeks an example, they must follow the guidance of Muhammad. For his intellect was created not to be an example for one person, but for all humanity. And such an example can only be grasped through the heart. For a mind without the heart cannot reach that depth. Ibn Arabi said of him, "His intellect was like a star falling into the heart, and that star tore through every darkness." That darkness was ignorance, arrogance, oppression, and above all, the ego's desire to set itself in the place of God. Prophet Muhammad stood against that ego not with intellect alone, but with a surrendered heart. And so his intellect grew not through conquests, but through realizations. He conquered Mecca, yet he did not become proud. For the true conquest was the conquest of the heart, and conquering a heart is far harder than taking a city. But he had first conquered his own soul, and because of this, he could touch every heart, not only through speaking, but also through silence, not only through teaching, but also through listening. For his intellect knew that truth spreads not only by speaking, but by understanding, and that intellect is still alive today. It still speaks, it still guides, and it does not call only to those who want to hear, it calls to those who truly wish to listen. Can you hear that voice? It is not a noise, it is a call made to the heart. And those who respond to this call are called his community, not only by name, but by intellect, by spirit, by following his trace. Within this call, there is also a place for you. You too can think as he thought, understand as he understood, and walk as he walked. But to do so, you must first silence the noise in your mind. For his intellect was born in silence, and truth can only be heard by the one who comes to silence.